Once again, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining for tonight's Bible study. And I pray that as we go through these important topics, your faith will be strengthened. And it is my prayer that we will be able to share with others as well. Let's begin with a prayer. Gracious Father, we thank you for the opportunity of coming together to study your word once again. Pray that you will forgive us of our sins and give us your Holy Spirit, that he will teach us tonight of your word and its realities in our lives. I pray that tonight's study will bring us much more closer to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, so our topic for today, we have been studying for quite some time now. Can you trust the Bible? These are some of the topics we have studied. Today we will look at evolution, then we have some more history. Is Bible any superior to other books, religious books? Is Bible out of touch with postmodern society? And finally, we will see how can we study Bible so that we can understand it for all it's worth. So tonight, it's part 7. Does evolution disprove the Bible? As I was preparing, I thought I have to do this in 2 parts because so much, and then I don't want to take too long time, especially for our friends from Africa who are joining very late. So I have divided into 2 parts. Next time we meet, we will do the other part. By the way, this will be the last session for some time, whole of February, for next few weeks. I won't be around. I'm going to India tomorrow night and for 4 weeks. So I'll be back only in March first week. Then anyway, look out for the notice on our WhatsApp groups when we will start. Then, the next part we will continue when I come back. So does evolution disprove the Bible? Now, when we talk of evolution, this is a word that almost every person who is educated, gone through school would know something about it. That's how popular it is. Now, as Christians, we believe in creation. There's no question about that. But have you realized, if you go through the history of the world, belief in creation was almost very popular until the 19th century. It doesn't mean to say that people did not doubt creation. There were almost, especially in the last 500 years, there were people who doubted creation, who came up with different theories. But the majority of population mostly believed in creation, including other religions as well, Hinduism and Islam and many other major religions. Of course, they do now also believe in creation, not in evolution. But evolution mostly affected, sad to say, Christian nations. And the one who coined evolution is also a Christian. So you can imagine where it came from. But anyway, but until the 19th century, creation was very popular. Most people believed, except for few philosophers and here and there who question certain things the way they are and all. But generally, creation was the most popular belief in how the world came into existence. Then comes the very popular theory of evolution. The word theory itself should give us an indication it is just a theory, but still it's the most popular. Then anyway, what is actually theory of evolution mean? The theory of evolution by natural selection, first formulated in the Darwin's book called Origin of Species in 1859. So around 150 years, 160 years. It is the process by which organisms change over time. What is he saying? Organisms actually change over time. Estonia people are okay. As a result of changes in heritable, physical, and behavioral traits. The changes are due to the inheritance and physiological and behavioral changes, the traits. Changes that, what are these changes allow an organism to adapt into its environment, will help it survive and have more offsprings. This is basically what the theory of evolution says. Let's look into a bit more detail so that we understand better. Now, we all know this man who has coined or who has come up with this theory, Charles Robert Darwin. He was an English naturalist, geologist, and biologist, best known for his contribution to the science of evolution. His proposition that all aspects, species of life have descended over time from common ancestry is now widely accepted and considered a foundational concept in science. That's what it is. He's a Britisher, no? Shrewsbury, born on February 1809, and he died in Downey. I don't know where these two places are. I don't. So 1882. What did he do when he was a student? I don't know if it was which university, but he went on a voyage 1831 to 1836, a matter of 5 years exploring. You can see on this map different countries as a biology student, I think, collecting so many things, fossils, and whatever he thinks interested to get to know the life. And after collecting all those things, he actually, he, and then for the next 20 years, he kept studying them, understanding the life and how it would have come and what, I don't know. We don't have to go into deeper details, but this is how, these are the countries you can see on the map. He traveled all over in those 5 years and collected as much as he could and then studied them for the next 20 years. Now, but before he actually, who was his inspiration is an important key. As I said, before Darwin, there were so many people who had ideas of some kind of a theories, but they could not bring it to some conclusion. Like, for example, this person, Thomas Robert Malthus, in 1766, you see this almost 100 years before Darwin could come up with that idea, or 80 years or so, was an English clerical scholar, an influential economist in the fields of political economy and demography. This is what he said. As the population of the world increases during his time, especially at that time, the world, mostly known world was Europe. So increases, he was particularly referring to Europe. At one point, it would, sorry, the word is not wood, it should be wood. It would increase much more than food supply is available, and that would cause fight for survival. So the first time the word survival comes from his mouth, there will be a fight for survival, because as people increase, there will be shortage of food and something like that, something. So this is actually what is the idea that helped Darwin come up with evolution, how evolution actually works, taking some of the teachings from this man. So what is survival of the fittest? In nature, there is a struggle for survival. This is what Darwin, in simple words, is trying to say. In nature, there is a struggle for survival. We know that. We all are a part of that, we know. Then it says the strongest individual is not necessarily the survivor. This is interesting. Sometimes we think, well, if you're strong, if you have money, if you have this, you can survive than the poor and the poor. But he says not necessarily the strongest would survive. Then who would survive? It is the one which best adapts to the environment where it lived. So according to Darwin, it's not necessarily the strongest who would survive, but the one who is best adapting to the environment that they are in or it is in are the ones that would survive. So if a living being has any traits that help him to survive, it will be more successful at reproduction. Those that don't adapt will die without a descendant. So that's what, so those things or those few people or life that survives well has more chances of reproducing or reproducing than those who do not survive, and eventually even their descendants might die because of they're not able to cope with the environment. So the creatures with most successful in reproducing pass their traits to their lineage, and so until these variations end up becoming a new species. So as their reproduction takes place and time goes, changes take place. That's what is basically the survival of the fittest is saying. So survival of the fittest by natural selection is the theory that he came up with. Oh, sorry. So what is natural selection? Is this differential survival and reproduction of individuals due to differences in phenotype. It is a key mechanism of evolution. The changes in the heritable traits, characteristics of a population over generation. So they take place, that's what he calls natural selection. They look at, maybe let me show this. How does it work? The adaptive radiation of Darwin's theory. What you see is so common is bird here, but what you see the difference is the beaks. Can you see the beaks? So he actually says based on the need and the environment, the changes take place in a being or this thing. For example, the beaks determine what these things. For example, look at that insect catching bee, fruit eating beak, dip netting, different for different things, different kind of bee. You can see their beaks, and this he says is based on the environment where they live. They adapt to survive. The theory of evolution by natural selection, for example, the finch. This is what he called finches, Darwin finches. So what does that mean? The finch species varied in size and shapes of their beaks. That's what we saw in this picture. The size of their beaks are different from one to another. We could see that they are different. So why is that? The finch species varied in size and shapes of their beaks. This variation of finches were based on their diet. Look at this. These variations of these beaks, he says, are directly related to their diet. When the original finches came from South America to Galapagos Islands, they migrated to different islands and have to adapt to different conditions in order to get food and survive. These adaptations were passed from one generation to the next. He believed that individual members of the species are slightly different from one another, and those that are best adapted to their habitat will stand a better chance of surviving to produce and pass on their beneficial traits to their offsprings. Over time, their beneficial traits become more common, allowing that particular species to evolve. So based on the diet, the changes take place. And in order to get food and survive, they have to adapt to different environments. And due to that, changes take place in their physiology. That's what he is trying to say. And then over time, these beneficial traits become more common, allowing them to particularly become a type of species and retain their identity. So critically, Darwin felt it is not the environment that produces the variations, but chance occurrences, which we now know to be genetic mutation that enable the organism to better exploit their environment. For example, initially he was trying to say it's the environment, but then I think scientifically it will be difficult even to prove that environment changes your shape and size and whatever. But then they came up with the basic changes in your physiology is because of genetic mutation that enables the organism to better exploit their environment. For example, the beak extension, as we showed you in this one, it is possible because of genetic mutation, and so that's what he was trying to say. So through natural selection, some species change and some are lost in extinction. So while these changes take place, some survive, and those that survive reproduce and they change, and those that cannot survive, they become extinct. So that's what we actually call survival of the fittest by natural selection. His famous statement, "It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change that survives." I think this should apply for our spiritual life also. It makes so much sense in our spiritual journeys. But in his biological terms, it's not the strongest species or the most intelligent that survives, but the one that is how the one responses to the changes around it that survives. So now then comes the idea, okay, that's how changes takes place in the species, but where did they all come from is a question. So the theory of evolution speaks about initially, in the beginning, that is 3.5 billion years ago, there was something called single-celled ancestor. A single cell from which what all you see today has evolved. What kind of things? Imagine everything: plant kingdom, fungus kingdom, animal kingdom, or whatever you see, everything came from a single cell. How did that happen? Two ways of how the organisms evolved, he says. Microevolution, what does that mean? This means variations within species. Within one species, you can see different variations. For example, dog or fox, within them, different breeds, different kinds of species within the same family or within the same thing, you can see they evolve into different kinds and shapes and forms, adapting according to their environment or something like that. Even the birds, they're all birds, but they within the variations you can see within the same species. This is what we call microevolution. For me especially, this makes sense. It is possible from one species, different kinds of same family, but they look different, they behave different. We understand this. But the next one is very interesting. The next, this is of course microevolution. Offsprings and parents. This is what is microevolution. This is from offsprings and parent. Offsprings comes from parent, and you can identify them. But the next thing is interesting, what we call macroevolution. In microevolution, variations within the same species. But in macroevolution, he comes up with this theory that species, what does it say? Evolving into another species. This is interesting, because in macroevolution, species will take entirely a different another species in nature. For example, an elephant can become a man, an animal can become a man, an insect can become a man can become, I don't know. They take different another species entirely. That's what he called macroevolution. For example, the example of macroevolution, during many years, this is how the development of man took place, from an ape to different stages, and finally where we are today. And of course, he again associates this changes through DNA mutation and recombination as well. Now, we are interested in our life, human life, rather than plants and animals and other things that he spoke about. So when it comes to human life, he says it didn't just happen overnight. The evolving of human life took place for millions of years ago. So there are different stages of human life that took place for where we are today. Those are the different stages. I can't even pronounce the names properly. Those are the different, but let's quickly look at one of each of them quickly. The first one is called Australopithecus. I hope I pronounced correctly. It's a genus of hominins that existed in Africa from around 4.2 to 1.9 million years ago. Remember, the world was the evolution took place from a single cell 3.5 billion years ago. That means almost 3.4 billion years, there is no human kind of life existence on this earth because evolution takes so many years according to him. So comparing to 3.5 billion, 4.2 to 1.5 million years ago seems to be very near to our time according to them. So around during this time, what happened? This beings existed in Africa, including modern humans, which come from this descendants, he says. Then the next is Homo habilis, is a species of archaic human from the early Pleistocene of East and South Africa, about 2.3 to 1.65 million years ago. Somewhat like this, where they think is the stage. The next comes the Homo erectus, first of its kind, where there is a closer resemblance to human life because they can stand a bit erect. Anyway, this says again with its earliest occurrences about 2 million years ago, and its specimens are among the first recognizable members of the genus Homo. Now the question is, how did they come to? Nobody saw these people. Nobody knew how they looked. How did they come to know? These are different stages, isn't it? We will look at that. There are certain findings they found from which they predicted or they thought this is how things would have. But right now, imagine these are the different stages that took place. Next is Homo neanderthalensis, are an extinct species or subspecies of archaic humans who lived in Eurasia until about 40,000 years ago. This is even closer, not in millions now, 40,000 years ago. They most likely went extinct due to competition with or extermination by immigrating European early modern humans or due to great climate change, disease, or a combination of these factors. According to this theory, this group actually became extinct, but they did survive around 40,000 years ago. Then comes, of course, the most popular that we all know, Homo sapiens. The science categorizes ourselves into this species, are a species of highly intelligent primates. They are the only extant members of the subscribed hominina, and together with chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans are part of the family Hominidae, the great apes or hominids. Humans are terrestrial animals characterized by their erect posture and bipedal locomotion, high manual dexterity, and heavy tool use compared to other animals, open-ended and complex language use compared to other animal communications, larger, more complex brains than other primates, and highly advanced and organized societies. When did they? Humans began to exhibit evidence of behavior modernity at least by about 100,000 to 70,000 years ago. So coming to our human life and its intelligence and language and lifestyle and adaptations, this theory comes to around 100 years or between 70 to 100 years, 70,000 to 100,000 years ago. This is where the adaptation of this species on human life seems to evolve. Now the question, how did they come up with all these different stages of million years and all? What did they find that they could come up with these ideas? So look at this. Piltdown man, human-like skull in Pleistocene gravel beds near Piltdown village in Sussex. This is all in England. 1912, Charles Darwin. This is what they found, some kind of a human skull they found as a fossil. So from studying this fossil, how it looked and trying to understand. And I don't know what all methods they would have used. I'm not a science student, but the common sense, what I know is that studying this in whatever scientific method they have used, they have to they came to conclusion those are the stages of human life. How many years it would have existed, how they would have lived, how they would have looked, how they would have survived. Can you imagine, just by looking at a skull, they could predict for millions of years of what it could have been. So what does this Piltdown man? He was a man. Piltdown man was a paleoanthropological fraud. This is what the science says. You can read this in Wikipedia, in which bone fragments were presented as the fossilized remains of a previously unknown early human. So finally, they came to conclude that this is actually a fraud. They took some bone fragments and tried to make up a story. Although there were doubts about its authenticity virtually from the beginning, the remains were still broadly accepted for many years, and the falsity of the hoax was only definitely demonstrated in 1953. It was in 1953, the scientific world, that it can't be true, that this built man thing gives us the full picture of the existence of man for millions of years and the adaptation and whatever. So the extensive scientific review in 2016 established that amateur archaeologist Charles Dawson was its likely perpetrator. So that's how recent scientific conclusions come up with this. But this was the most important thing. Those people took it to study, to come up with the idea of human life. Then something else they found, all from which also the human life was studied, called Nebraska man. Nebraska man. What is this? Nebraska man was a name applied to Hesperopithecus. I can't even pronounce Heroldicokia putative species of ape. How did they know? It was heralded as the first higher primate of North America. It was originally described by Henry Fairfield Osborn in 1922. How did he come up with this Nebraska man? On the basis of a tooth found by rancher and geologist Harold Cook in Nebraska in 1917. In other words, they found a tooth, just a tooth. And out of that tooth, the story came up of this Nebraska man, when he would have existed, how he would have lived, how he would have survived. Although Nebraska man was not a deliberate hoax, the original classification proved to be a mistake and was retracted in 1927. Then Hesperopithecus means ape of the Western world. Now, the last one was African. Now it is the ape of the Western world, I believe. And Harold Cook was given as the species name in reference to Cook. But then, strangely or so, this was not a tooth of any human. Later, they found out upon examination, this was actually the tooth of a pig that is not in existence anymore. But the theory went viral and everybody seemed to believe this is one of the ways human life existed. Then comes the Java man theory. Java man, or Homo erectus, formerly also Anthropithecus erectus, is an early human fossil. This was discovered in 1891 on the island of Java, Dutch East Indies, now part of Indonesia. What did they discover? A fossil, estimated to be between 700 to 1 million years ago. It was, at that time of discovery, the oldest hominid fossils ever found. It remains the type specimen for Homo erectus. So just from this fossil, like a bone, they were able to come up with the theory of people who would have lived, how many? 700 to 1,000 years ago. That's why, for me, actually, it takes faith. It takes more faith to believe evolution than creation. Then comes the Heidelberg man. What is this one? Is an extinct species or subspecies of archaic humans in the genus Homo, which radiated in the middle Pleistocene, from about 700 to 300 years, 700,000 to 300,000 years ago. The derivation of Homo sapiens from Homo rhodesiensis have often been proposed, but it obscured by a fossil gap from 400 to 260,000 years ago. So this is another theory, but they say there's a gap of almost 400 to 16 years where they can't find any evidence of how these things could have developed. Then comes the next, the same thing. This is how, based on the fossil they found, they even predicted how the lifestyle of man would have been, how he would hunt animals, how he would drink water. All sorts of things were done just by looking at a bone. So you can see how they have come up with the theory of existence or evolution of a man into who he is today. And this seems to be the most popular theory that everybody seems to believe of our ancestry and how we came into being. But behind all these things, whatever the first cell that came into being or 3.5 billion years ago, how did it all begin? What is again the most popular theory within this evolution thing is the Big Bang theory. Because this is mostly broadly accepted theory for the origin and evolution of our universe, which states that the universe began as an incredibly hot. Look at this. How did the universe begin? Even before human life, you could even think of human life. How did the universe begin? It began as what? Incredibly hot, dense point, some point. This is how long, how many years ago? 13.7 billion years ago. What interests me is they even say 0.7. I don't know how they come up with that, but maybe if you're a scientific student, you might understand better. But so it's not a general figure, a specific figure. 13.7 billion years ago, there was the universe began as a hot, incredibly hot, just a dense point. So how did the universe go from being a fraction of an inch, a few millimeters across, to what it is today? Can you imagine? There was nothing. How did it happen? This is the explanation. The Big Bang was not an explosion in space, as the theory name might suggest. So it's not just boom, something exploded. Instead, it was the appearance of a space everywhere in the universe. Researchers have said, according to the Big Bang theory, the universe was born as a very hot, very dense, single point in space. Everything was empty. 13.7 billion years ago, there was what? Some Big Bang. There was a appearance of a single point. And so what happened? When the universe was very young, something like 100th of a billionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second. I don't know how tiny that could be. So when it was that small, 13.7 billion years ago, it underwent an incredibly growth spurt. Somehow, sometimes in human life, our children shoot up all of a sudden in no time. That's what we call growth spurt. So the theory says, and when it began 13.7 billion years ago as a tiny, 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 tiny thing, all of a sudden there was a growth spurt. Imagine, they're talking about billions of years, and they know that there was a growth spurt. Look at the explanation. During this burst of expansion, which is known as inflation, the universe grew exponentially and doubled its size to at least 90 times. Even if it is a tiny of a second, 90 times is not even as big, but yet it became that big. Then the universe was expanding, and as it expanded, it got cooler. So it started as a hot spot, and then it expanded at the growth spurt. Then as it expanded, it became cold and then less dense, according to this scientist from Princeton University. Then after inflation, the universe continued to grow, but at a slower rate. As space expanded, the universe cooled and matter formed. So there was no matter. I think last time when we said matter can never be created nor destroyed. That's what the science says. But when this Big Bang theory took place, there was no matter. But after some time, when the universe expanded, when the universe cooled down, matter just formed. From where? Don't know. It just formed from that whatever took place. This is how the explanation says Big Bang expansion 13.7 billion years ago. Initially, look at that, inflation took place. Then there was some period of darkness. First stars appeared after 400 million years after the Big Bang. This is how sometimes the development of the world or Big Bang theory, they say. Now, birth of our solar system. As we said, that's how they began. Human life is way, way far from when the Earth began. So when this universe began, how did these stars and moon and solar systems begin? Look at the explanation. Our solar system is estimated to have been born a little after 9 billion years after the Big Bang. So from the time of Big Bang until the solar system, 9 billion years. So that means 13.7 minus 9 billion, it's around before 4.5 billion years ago, only the solar system was formed, making it about 4.6 billion years old. According to current estimates, the sun is one of more than 100 billion stars in our Milky Way galaxy alone, and orbits roughly 25,000 light years from the galactic core. Many scientists think that the sun and the rest of our solar system was formed from a giant rotating cloud of gas and dust known as the solar nebula. As gravity caused the nebula to collapse, it spun faster and flattened into a disk. During this phase, most of the material was pulled towards the center to form the sun. I actually need a lot of faith to believe this. And yet everybody believes. Imagine how the solar system. And I think we studied about God and the design and the creation. If you remember, if not, go to my YouTube channel and watch the previous series on Does God Exist and the evidence for God, especially for evidence. The title is Evidence for God. You will find some interesting facts there. Imagine scientists today say that the position of the sun is crucial to the life on this earth. If it was even a point something closer than where it is, human life won't exist. Even if it was a little further than where it is, we will all be frozen to death. Exact spot where life is possible, it is there. And so that precise it is. And according to this theory, look at how it formed. It formed from a giant rotating cloud of gas and dust. And then slowly the gravity caused the nebula to collapse, I believe. It spun faster and flattened into a disk. During this phase, most of the material was pulled towards the center to form the sun. How did they come up with this? Well, that's why it's called a theory. They came up, they want to give an explanation to how everything exists. And this is the best they could come up, and we believe. So this is how. Then this is what the science says. We still need to know more. And apart from trying to explain whatever they can to give an answer to the existence of life, this is how the conclusion comes. While much has been discovered about the creation and evolution of the universe, there are enduring questions that remain unanswered. Dark matter and dark energy remains two of the biggest mysteries. But cosmologists continue to probe the universe in hope of better understanding how it all began. As much as they give all the explanation of how things could have developed and come to this conclusion, they don't give you a definite conclusion. They still say we are still trying to find out how things. And two of the great mysteries they're talking about is the matter. the dark matter and the energy. How did they come into existence is a mystery. But in the previous slide, we saw when the earth cooled down, matter was formed. They said it, but how is it formed? How was it possible to form from nothing? Or they're still trying to work it out. So, Big Bang and Genesis. This, as I said, it needs more faith to believe this Big Bang theory and evolution than in a creation. If you show me a phone and say, how did it come about? I tell you, yeah, somebody made it. So try to think of an explosion that created order. That's what happened according to the Big Bang. There was a hot, dense spot from which growth spurt took place, and slowly, in millions and billions of years, order came. Can you think of that? Can a human brain actually understand that out of an explosion, an order is created? Bombing created order. Can you imagine that? For example, those two cities in Japan that were bombed. Was there any order that created out of that? So Big Bang produced plants, animals, seasons, solar system, life, all these things just like that. One of the scholars said, your garage, put what all you don't want, or all, what do we leave in the garage? Things that we don't use, some rubbish, some old things or whatever. Says, you leave all those things in your garage and wait for however many years you want to wait. According to Big Bang theory, after years and years and years, millions of years or whatever, it has to come up to some other form, probably alive, doing things, all the rubbish that was in it. For a human mind, with their right mind, I don't see that happening. I can see it disintegrate, not coming into order and becoming another species or whatever, like the macro evolution theory. So ultimately, they're trying to say creatures evolved without a creator. And in order to prove that, then they have to come up with all the theories like this, which can make sense. Just because they have an explanation, whether the explanation is authentic or not, whether it is believable or not, there is some explanation. So next time I come, I will show you some facts on those things. So the denial of creator with this belief. Next time we come, I will conclude this evolution with these most important things that actually make. Today we looked at how maybe what the science and evolution and Darwin theory tells, life came with natural selection and survival of the fittest and the Big Bang. But how did they come up with these millions of years, and how did it? One of the things we know is carbon dating. That's one thing. When they find the fossil, they look at the carbon that is in the fossil and determine how many years it is, how true it is, how accurate it is. We will see it next time. And are there any errors in evolution? I've read some in literature on this. Many renowned scientists have given amazing statements on the errors in evolution. I will show them to you in our next session. And finally, we will look at, do we have evidence for creation? Do we really have an evidence, or we simply because we believe in a God? We will look at them next week. Now, next time I come, as I said, we will not meet for some time, but look out for the notice on the group.
Thank you, Pastor.
I need to stop recording.